Hey everybody, Larry Lawton here. We got a great edition. We got an update on Kodak Black, and I'm with Kodak Black's attorney who's been with them from the start, Brad Cohen. Good guy, got to know him, has some great insight, and we want to let you guys know what's going on with Kodak Black because you asked. Let me bring Brad right in. Hey Brad, nice seeing you.
How are you, Larry? Nice to see you.
A couple of things. We're going to update with Brad, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Hopefully Kodak will be doing well too in the next couple of weeks, but we'll update everybody on what's going on with his cases.
Now we're going to get into prison because you deal a lot with prisoners, I do,
Sure.
and you deal a lot with Kodak Black.
Yes, I'm always a big fan, and I've always talked to people about prison reform because I think you can't have justice reform without prison reform. Justice reform in itself should include people not going to prison, right? But once they're in prison, what do we do for them while they're in prison, and how do we treat them? Are we a third world country, or do we treat people with respect and dignity, which they should be treated with respect and dignity? I understand the punishment aspect of prison. I'm not a babe in the woods. But at the same token, there is something to be said about punishment and torture. There's a difference there. And putting people in 23, 24-hour lockdown is not good for anyone once they're released, because their mental ability and where they are when they get released is very important to society, right? Because you don't want individuals going in one way, coming out a lot worse, which is basically what you see in a lot of these places. A lot of these places are just storage units. They're not real rehabilitation places where they can teach classes, where they can get drug treatment help to attack the core. That's what you need to do so that you don't see recidivism and you don't see them coming back into the system.
Hey, just to let you know, obviously you know what we do here is prison reform, a lot of it. And let me give you a couple of numbers and you can use them. A person who leaves incarceration from the SHU, special housing unit, the whole, my audience knows what it is. If you leave from the SHU into society, your recidivism rate's near 70%. If you leave from the yard, it's still high. It's in the 40s, high 40s. So it's a big difference, like you said. And people, I love that when they say, oh, we give them rec, we give them, you said it right. When you clicked on, you said 23, 24. Exactly, it's 24. They have every excuse in the world to say, well, for the safe and orderly running of the institution, we gave no rec.
Right.
We didn't give you even legal time to do your legal work, as I know. So let's get into Kodak Black.
Sure.
Kodak Black has been, on our channel. We highlighted him, and I've mentioned him on other shows because I think we need to do what you said. He's a young kid, successful rapper. Did he make mistakes? Yes. Stupid mistakes? Yes. Did he deserve to get? And let's give the audience. Why don't you give the audience from the beginning what he was charged with, how much time he got, and a little bit of a background on the case.
Good. So he was charged with essentially lying on a governmental form, and that governmental form that he lied on is a 4473. It's a form to obtain firearms. He was not a convicted felon at the time that he filled out the form, but one of the questions on the form is essentially, do you have any cases that are pending that would affect quote unquote interstate commerce? Most, I would say 90% of the country doesn't know, what would or would not affect interstate commerce, but just for your audience, everything affects interstate commerce. When the feds want to charge you with a crime, essentially they can say anything affects interstate commerce. If you have a weapon on you and you commit a crime, it could be federal because the weapon would be made in a different state and they would use that as affecting interstate commerce. So, and that's been upheld by many, many courts.
Just to highlight that area, myself and my audience knows that I was under the RICO Act, the Hobbs Act, which is interfering with interstate commerce because the jewelry I robbed was made in another place. And it goes for McDonald's, I often explain it. Even though robbing a McDonald's is a regular local crime, since McDonald's gets its potatoes from Idaho,
there you go.
You're interfering with interstate commerce.
Correct. That's exactly correct. So anything can interfere with interstate commerce. So he checked off the wrong box. He got charged with lying on a governmental form. Because he has some priors when he was a youthful offender, that kicked him up into different levels. And how the federal system works is it's kind of like a grid. If anyone ever played, You Sank My Battleship, it's kind of the same thing. It's a grid where at the top is your criminal history and on the side is the level that you score for the crime that you committed. So the level that you score for the crime you committed, it can go up or down depending on several factors. So there's enhancements, which Kodak ended up getting. Enhancements because he was purchasing 3 weapons, that is an enhancement. Because he was on bond, that's an enhancement. All these different things that were enhancing his score, which should have been around the 12 or 13 and scored him maybe 18 or 19 months, it kicked him up into the 50 plus months. The judge looked at it during sentencing and said to himself, okay, I agree, his past criminal history is overstated. I don't think it is as great as they put down on paper, and I'm willing to knock off some of those months, and he ended up giving him 46 months instead of, I think, 56 months.
Did he get a gun?
He did get the guns,
okay,
but he was able to carry a weapon. The thing is that he is not a convicted felon. So at the time that he purchased those weapons, he was not a convicted felon. The only crimes he ever had were from withholds of adjudication. So he was never a convicted felon. So if he possessed a weapon, the possession of the weapon itself in the federal system would not be a crime. That's why they only charged him with the paperwork offense.
Wow, I didn't know that. So I knew that you had to have a felony, and I know misdemeanors and no contender and all that doesn't matter. So now they get him for filing, I guess, a false statement, actually?
Correct.
That's what it is. Is it the same as Bill Clinton, 18 U.S.C. 1001?
It's kind of like, it is comparable. It's a different statute, but it is comparable. It's lying on a governmental form. And, you know, when you take a step back, and if it was 46 months and the judge was able to give him what he advised and BOP was able to put him into those programs, he would have probably done in the high 20s because the judge recommended several programs that he was available to do. RDAP, which is, we know that is the residential drug treatment program in the system, and I think it would have been very beneficial to Kodak. Any kind of mental health treatment that was available, and some advanced courses that he wanted to take. So the judge allowed him to do that and recommended to BOP to do that, as well as recommended to BOP to keep him in Florida, and BOP did the exact opposite, which is not a surprise.
The BOP, and you know, it's only a recommendation from a judge. They can do whatever they want. They did it to me. They're supposed to, by BOP policy, which we used to litigate, they're supposed to keep you within 500 miles of your house. That obviously they do what they want, and they use I call it the acronym for the safe and orderly running of the institution. It's called and that's been upheld, sadly.
Correct.
But the BOP is in of itself is such a I hate to call it a criminal organization.
It's
close.
Funny that it is very close in my opinion. I think that it's run that way because they are the only people who look out for themselves. It's literally the fox watching the hen house. Because what happens is that any hearings that are held, any documents that are filed, anything that happens, they're their own watchdog. They watch their own stuff. They're the judge. They're the jury. They're the executioner. They do it all. I've been pushing very, very hard for a third party to come in unannounced, do spot checks, do things like that, when in reality what they do is they give the place 2 weeks notice before they come in. They pull certain prisoners, right, that the jail and prison already knows who they're going to pull, and they ask them, how are they treating you here? And if the prisoner says, oh, they're treating me horrible, you can imagine what's going to happen to them because they're not moving that prisoner afterwards.
Let me give you one. I did a whole show on this. It's called the ACA, American Accreditation Association, which does the prison inspections. And I was a big proponent against them because what you just said, they give them 2 weeks notice. On my channel and your audience, and the audience will look, I had a former prison guard who ended up going to prison. He's a good dude. I knew him when I was in prison. And he was my guard. I actually interviewed him, and we talked about the ACA and how much bullshit it was. He was the president of the union. And what you said is so true. They need an independent body that can surprise a prison.
Correct.
At 2 a.m. on a Sunday.
Correct.
And the minute the lieutenant on call doesn't let them in, he gets fired. That'll shut down that thing. Come in and at least go and try. And with a system in place that if an inmate said something and it was against the prison, if he has any kind of retaliation, whether you call back, write back, we could set up a system that then that warden gets fired or somebody else.
Something like that.
Something to stop it.
And I've talked about this for years and years and years, because I've seen it, and I've had since the Big Sandy incidents with Kodak, which we'll get to. Since those incidents, I've had prison guards call me, ex-prison guards from Big Sandy, from other areas in Mississippi, and all these different prisons, and they say, "Hey, I read about what you were making accusations against in the Big Sandy case, and I can tell you it's happened before in my prison. It's happened before in my prison." I mean, I've heard that time and time again. One guy is currently a probation officer. He called me. He's like, "I don't care if they find out who I am or not, but I used to be a prison guard, and I can tell you the 4-point restraint, 100%. The water, 100%. They leave the windows open in the wintertime, 100%. They leave you in the 4-point restraints with no clothes on." So those type of things that happen, that we make these accusations, and people say, "Wow, that doesn't sound like that could happen. Someone's going to be chained to a bed with their arms and their legs, and they're in like paper underwear, soaking wet with a window open in 40-degree weather. That just doesn't sound like it would happen." I have individuals that are saying that used to work in these places that are saying not only does it happen, it happens frequently.
You know, Brad, my audience knows I was strapped down naked, beaten, tortured, 4-pointed, and they say, and they peed on me. And that was all people came into the prison. They ended up firing people. But it happens so often. Now they have the restraint chairs, which are just as bad or worse sometimes. And I was 4-pointed, and I look at that, and you said it. I often call the United States prison system a third world prison system. Compared to Germany, France, England, Spain, Norway, all regular countries, Canada, we have the worst prison system. Sadly, we really do.
It's a bad prison system. So in Kodak's case, to get back to Kodak's case, he got 46 months. Our idea was that he was going to be able to serve that in a medium prison, because I did the scoring. You know, there's an internal scoring sheet that they use.
But what made him get to a medium even?
The medium, the only reason why he would have scored a medium at the time was that he had a pending case in New York, a hold out of him in New York that was kicking him up, and he got into an altercation in Miami that was kicking him up. I got that New York case dismissed, or I think he got like probation, 12 months probation, and he ended up getting that hold taken off of him. So then he would have scored somewhere between, it would have been discretionary. It was like right on the cusp of a low and a medium, and he was still in a maximum. And they said because of the orderly safety, all the things, you know, they gave every excuse under the book. And even they got it wrong, even on their score sheet, because they scored him as a level 3 criminal history when the judge used a level 2 criminal history. So right off the bat, they did things wrong on that sheet. So I pointed those things out. Didn't matter. He was in Big Sandy. He had issues in Big Sandy. We have a pending lawsuit in Washington, D.C. now against Big Sandy.
Bivens?
Yep.
But a question on that. The BOP actually does the scoring afterwards. The probation department does the original scoring.
Right. So
they didn't accept it?
So the probation scored him with a level 3. The judge, during sentencing, said, "I'm going to use a level 2 because I think it's overstated." It should have been corrected at that point, but then when he was getting evaluated for what prison he was going to go to, they have an internal form for that, and they were scoring him a level 3 still. So I got a hold of that internal scoring sheet. I gave it to one of our experts. She went through it, and she's like, "This is incorrect." I sent them a letter that's incorrect, and even though it's quote-unquote incorrect, they said, "Yeah, it might be incorrect, but for the safety of everybody, we're going to keep him at a maximum security prison."
And he'll get to his case manager, and they'll look it up and all that bullshit.
And
they
you're
say,
8 months.
Never happens.
No,
never happens.
And you're 8 months down the road, and all of a sudden you're in this maximum security prison where he's literally, I think when he got there, he was probably just turning 21. He was the youngest inmate at that maximum security prison. Not only that, he was the only inmate with the least amount of time in that maximum security prison. His roommate was a triple lifer. I think everybody on his row were lifers. And here's a kid who's literally got 3 years to go at the time, maybe even less. And he's in with lifers at 21 years old. So it's not a fair system. And when I say that, people sometimes are like, "Oh, well, it's not," you know, fairness gets excluded out of a lot of conversations because like they say, "Oh, it's the law though. This is the law. It might be fair, might not be fair, but that's the law." The law is based on fairness. Like ultimately the law is based on fairness, right? Don't steal, don't do these things. These are things that people came up with the 10 Commandments that are based on fairness. It's not something that someone came up with all of a sudden. But when you say the word fair in court, or you say the word fair in a letter, everyone's like, well, life's not fair, this isn't fair, but it should be, okay? So the point is that Kodak was at that Big Sandy, Kentucky. No programs offered, no RDAP program offered, nothing that he could take whatsoever, even voluntarily. No access to a priest or a rabbi. In his case, he wanted to see a rabbi. He had no access to a rabbi. And because of the incident in Miami, which this is a whole separate set of facts, but because of the incident in Miami, they didn't hear that until 7 months later. So he was in the SHU for 7 months waiting for a hearing. He gets a hearing and they give him another 6 months.
It's sad what the system is doing now. They're actually putting kids who are under 25 with 10 years or more, automatic penitentiaries.
Right.
But he had not even close to that time.
Not even close.
And the danger for him, for people jealous and stuff and not getting out. I was in maximum security prisons, and it's bad. Even myself, as an older, wiser, really a criminal, this kid is a kid, and I look at him and I say, what damage are we doing to him down the road?
Correct.
I mean,
non-violent crime.
Non-violent crime. He had no business being in a penitentiary.
No business being
zero.
Yeah, correct. No business being in a maximum security prison. So I complained enough to where they finally moved him, ironically, further away from Florida to outside of Chicago. This prison seems to be a little bit better. It's still a maximum security prison.
It's a penitentiary.
It's a penitentiary.
What is he doing in a penitentiary?
That's the big question.
I mean, I gotta have people look this up, and all my audience out there, I want you to look this case up. I want you to look Kodak Black. I want you to look at United States Penitentiary and what the system says. You can look at it even on the internet. I mean, obviously go through some of our videos. A penitentiary is made for people with life sentences. When I was in Atlanta, was the worst prison at the time. We had 2,000 inmates, 880 had life. And in the system, life means letters. There's no parole, nothing. You never get out. You die. That's the only way to get out of that prison. And how many people had 50, 60 years?
Oh, yeah. It's crazy. So this prison is actually a little bit better. He is partaking in some higher education classes, management classes, and things like that he's not getting credit for in terms of getting time off. He just actually wants to better himself. Correct. And he's always done that. He's always wanted to better himself, even when he's in. He got his GED when he was in Broward, not ordered by the court. He just got it on his own. And I remember the day that he got his GED. He called me. He was like so happy, so proud of himself that he got his GED, that it was like, it was something that he wanted to do for himself, and he did. And that's why these courses that the judge recommended, I think, would have been so helpful for him, that the prison is refusing to put him in a place where he can partake in those. So that's a real problem in itself. But this prison that he's in now, I actually have contact with his case manager. His case manager is actually a gentleman in this prison.
So you're finding the personnel meet. Let's get to personal with Kodak.
Sure.
How is he doing, do you think, mentally?
I talk to him like probably once a week. I think that Kodak is a very strong individual mentally, in terms of that he goes into these situations where he's in 23 or 24-hour lockdown, and he writes. Like, this kid writes manuscripts. He's written a movie. He's written a show. He writes more music. I mean, he probably wrote, he can bang out a rap in probably an hour, a hit. And he just keeps sending them. So I'm saving them all in a box for when he gets out, so that he can readdress everything that he sent.
When I was in, I used to obviously write as well, and it keeps your mind away from what the craziness around you.
Correct.
And as a young kid, what I worry about is his association with bad people that are not the right people. Let's call it what it is. Whether it's certain gang members, whether it's people who want something from him. He is a celebrity. He does have notoriety, and they're going to try his money. They're going to try him in a lot of ways, and it's tough for him. Whatever he can say, and he wants to be a tough guy.
It's a hard life. Nobody wants to be in a maximum security prison. Let me put it like, even if you think you're a gangster, you don't know what it's like in a maximum security prison. Just going to visit there, I'm not going to say I'm the toughest guy in the world, but I can hold my own. And you go into some of these places and you're just like, it's another level of bad. No one wants to be in a maximum security prison, especially if you're 21 or 22. I can't imagine if I was 21 or 22 going in there. I'm turning 50, and when I go in there, there's some things that I'm like, wow, this is like, that's a scary situation. And I don't care how tough you are. When there's 10 guys that want something from you, there's 10 guys that want something from you. So it's a bad situation in maximum security.
You make such a great point, Brad, because when I went to prison for the long stretch, I was 34. And mature connections with the mob, everything else,
around the
and
block.
it's rough.
Right.
And I'll be 60 this year. Jeez, I'm getting old. And you're right, as tough as it is, it's a different level. And I that's why I'm hot on this case, because I think it's so unjust what they're doing to this young guy. First of all, the length of time, come on. Are they trying to make an example of him? What does the U.S. Attorney say? Why? I mean, I've never heard of a case with paperwork. I mean,
46 months.
46
it's crazy.
months.
It's crazy. And that's why we put in for the commutation with the president.
Yes, you put in a commutation. Have you done any briefs, COVID briefs to the federal courts yet?
So Kodak did a pro se brief. It wasn't legally sufficient, but that being said, for the commutation, it does show that he's trying some resolving any kind of outstanding possible other way that he could get out, or any other kind of mitigation that he's done. So they denied it based on that it wasn't legally sufficient. I'm hoping that the president, considers his commutation. There's been a lot of news about it. We've gotten calls from a lot of black leaders in the United States that are like, this is completely unjust because it's 46 months for a 22-year-old on a paperwork case. We've had a lot of people like Lamar Jackson, the quarterback from the Baltimore Ravens, and Jake Paul, and Little Pump, and Little Yachty, and Yo Gotti, and Gucci Mane. They're all tweeting that Kodak should get a chance here because it's just an unjust sentence. And I put together the commutation packet, and when I was putting together the commutation packet, some of the charity things that he's done, I totally forgot about. Like I had to go online and start pulling things on, and it's like he paid for kids to go to college that couldn't afford to go to college. He paid for a little kid's funeral whose mom couldn't afford to pay for a funeral. He paid for 3 fallen officers' funerals, and then gave their kids like 5 or 10 grand a piece for Christmas anonymously. Like, he was doing so much stuff before this even came down that, like, literally I would forget from year to year the amount of charity work that he would do. Every Christmas he does Christmas giveaways. This past Christmas he adopted 60 families from Broward, gave them all toys, food, provided lunch, gift cards. Like, he goes over and above like what anyone does in terms of charity. Maybe it's not like, oh, he's donating $1 million to this charity, but he does it on a little micro scale where it really affects people's lives. He's not giving $1 million to the United Way.
And he's not making money now.
No.
I mean, so this young man still has that heart, and obviously as a guy who was in prison and understanding how tough that is, you're worried about your own mental state, and now he's still doing that on the outside is an amazing, really credit to his maturity.
It is. And every time I talk to him, I bring up current events. I tell him, hey, this is what's happening. I just read something about an officer that got shot in the line of duty. He's got 3 kids. He'll tell me, hey, make sure all those kids are taken care of for Christmas. Like, anything that I discuss with him, he takes it and runs with it. There's a new charity organization called, I think, the Barstool Fund, but with Dave Portnoy. And Dave is the greatest. He's an amazing guy, and he owns Barstool Sports. They were just bought by a bigger company, but he put together this thing called the Barstool Fund that does, it's putting money together to support small little restaurant businesses, mom and pops in different hoods, in Brooklyn, in Pompano, all these different areas. And I was just talking to Kodak about it. Kodak's like, make sure you hook up with him, make sure you take care of him, make sure you that the money goes to like Pompano and stuff like that, local areas, that they'll help local restaurants. I mean, like I said, like the kid is amazing. It's one thing to read about somebody on paper and to be like, oh man, he's accused of this or accused of that. And then it's one thing to have interaction with him. Like I consider him like part of my family. Like my son, I was talking to him on the phone the other day. He was on speakerphone. My son heard him. He's yelling, Uncle Kodak, and Kodak's talking to my son. I mean, literally, listen, I don't have that type of relationship with every one of my clients. I try to take care of every one of my clients like their family. But literally, I have a family-like relationship with Kodak where it pains me to see his mom cry about the situation, his son cry about the situation. You know, he hasn't been able to talk to his son since he's been in because he's been in the SHU and they don't allow phone calls. He hasn't seen anybody since he's been in the SHU, especially with COVID. I tried to go see him. They said, oh, there's still COVID running wild. So there's a lot of things that the public doesn't know about Kodak, and there's a perception about Kodak sometimes that, oh, like he always is in trouble. He always that. But if you really look at the cases, they're total. There's nothing.
BS,
It's
bullshit.
a BS case. Like I'm going to give you an example of one case because this is a funny case. There was a case back in the day. This is how this whole thing started. Now I wasn't his attorney; he had a different attorney. There's a case back in the day. He got charged with kidnapping. Now you read that, and you go, "Holy shit, kidnapping! That's a serious. That's as serious as it gets, right?" So you're reading this kidnapping case, and all of a sudden you realize, and even in the police report, you realize, well, what's going on with this kidnapping case? Well, 5 kids, and it's in the police report, 5 kids broke into his mom's house, stole a bunch of shit, ran out. He found out who those 5 kids were. He went around the neighborhood, picking them up, taking away their phones, bringing them to his mom's house so they would apologize to his mom for breaking into her house. Legitimately, it's in the police report. That is the kidnapping case. The first lawyer he had pled him out to that, to like probation. And that's how this whole thing started. Then he violated probation with a little, like a nothing case, a marijuana possession. And that's what kept going, is like little violations until, we're here where we are today.
So you've watched him grow up.
Yeah.
I mean, now you've been with him for how long? Right?
5 years.
So he's 22 now?
Correct.
So you've been with him since he's 17 years old?
Correct.
Wow. So you're actually seeing a kid mature and all the stuff and
it's talk about things. We talk about different things. The kid reads and talks about different books. We're talking about different books that he's reading. And I want to just go back to this kidnapping case for a quick second, because this is the most poignant point of that, is that out of the 5 kids that he brought back, 3 of them are serving life in prison. 2 of them committed a murder while they broke into someone else's house. The other one had like 7 or 8 burglaries that he got a life felony for, armed burglaries.
And he was trying to stop this stuff.
Correct. The 2 of them, I guess, got scared straight. But the other 3 are serving life in prison. And that was the kidnapping case. That was the big case. It's a kidnapping case. So when you read it on paper, it's a totally different thing than when you know the kid.
Let's get right to it.
Sure.
Do you think there's racism involved?
Pompano Beach is when you have Broward Sheriff's Office in Pompano Beach, before Sheriff Tony took over, I think that there was a significant amount of pressure put on that area, in that I don't know if I'd call it straight out racism, because there's black cops, white cops, and I don't limit racism to white cops. I mean, there's some that'll do things that are, Mexican, Spanish, black. It doesn't matter. This particular area, they definitely have a affinity towards the kids in that area to not try and pick them up, but try to put them down.
Well, that's what I always talk about, police reforms. Spending the money the right way. Instead of tanks, how about community centers? Instead of, more armor, more of this, how about basketball courts? Keep the kids better. Mentors, guys like yourself and myself, older guys who've been through some stuff. Try to mentor these kids to show them that we want to help.
Super
instead
tough.
Just
it's super tough. And that's why they grow up, a lot of the kids in Pompano grow up with the mentality that police are bad. And the reason why they grow up with that police are bad is because what they see. I mean, Kodak at 8 or 9 years old is seeing kids get shot in front of him, not by police, but by just drive-by shootings. Like, no one addresses really the heart of why an individual is like the individual is. And when you're 8 or 9, think about this. Guys go to Iraq, Iran, and they come back with PTSD because they're full-grown men. They're 20, 21, 22 years old, and you're seeing your friend get shot, or you're seeing something happen, and you come back and you have severe PTSD, right? You're talking about an 8 or 9-year-old kid that is in a neighborhood where there's drive-by shootings, sometimes your house gets shot, they witness their friends getting the shot, they witness their friends getting killed, all these different things growing up, and no one says like, hey, maybe we should take a look, maybe there's some PTSD with some of these guys that grew up in these neighborhoods, and nobody wants to do that. But it's ironic that we think that a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old is somehow not as equipped as an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old is not equipped at all, right? You're talking about guys that are 25 and 30 that come back with PTSD. When you have an 8-year-old that witnesses stuff like that, it's beyond PTSD. It severely affects, I think, that whole generation. And I think there's something that we can do to bring them back, but not what we're doing now.
Well, I often talk about you can't compare a kid who grows up in the hood and hears gunshots and neighbors who are a prostitute and this, everything going on, and then a kid who's a doctor's kid goes to this school and they're nice. And I'm not knocking the doctor's kid at all. Right. I'm just saying, you don't tell me you can compare them apples to apples.
No.
It's just not.
No. And sometimes as a judge, there are judges that really look at that, you know, and say like, hey, wait a minute, well, how did he grow up? Why did he grow up? Why did he do this? How is he doing this? There are some judges like that, but they're very few and far between. Most judges just look at the crime, look at the individual and say like, hey, listen, this is what, well, I'm going to give you a break. You know, I'm going to do this because you're a young guy. Instead of saying like, hey, let's fix what's going on here. There's more to the story here. There's got to be a reason why this is going on. Is it, you know, the dad's not around? Is it that, you know, you witnessed something traumatic in your life? There's something more to it than this kid just suddenly decide to break into houses.
Well, I often tell people this quick story. A kid who's 21, he comes to prison. He robbed a bank because he was a drug addict. And he did it with a note. He gets 5 years for prison. They don't touch what the problem was with his drugs and stuff. So he comes to prison. What does he do? He does drugs. What do they do in prison? They take him and they put him in the shoe, put him in a hole. They take away his phone, take away his commissary, take away his visits. So if he did have anybody who was still trying to stay in contact, a guy with a construction business, can't even call him anymore. He loses touch with him. He ends up gets out of the shoe. He's still a drug addict, never touched his addiction issue or the base cause. So what does he do in prison? He gravitates towards the people who are going to give him drugs, and he might have to, one, do something, whether it's sex, whether it's stab somebody, whether it's to do. Now, let's say he gets out. He's 24 years old, 25 years old. He gets out. He doesn't have HIV, hopefully. He doesn't have any kind of disease or whatever, but they never helped his drug addiction. He gets to the street, now he's worse. Right. Because he don't fear prison, and he's still an addict. He's going to get what he has. And we're not hitting the cause of what's going on.
Nobody does it. Nobody does it. And
well, they are, you know, and I'm gonna push back on that. There are countries.
Oh yeah,
Norway, Sweden, Germany.
I'm talking about
look
here.
At those
nobody does it here. Nobody does it here. And you know, when we talk about justice reform and prison reform, the president had the First Step Act and the Second Chance. I think both of those were good starts. I think that they need a little bit more teeth in them, so that like when you recommend 500 miles from wherever you live, they should be. It's not just it's for the safety of everyone. We have to send them. There needs to be some sort of litmus test of why you're sending him 3,000 miles away. Because if it's not 500 miles away, why can't you send him 700 miles away? Why is there not a prison in Mississippi? Why is there not a prison in someplace else that's close?
They're off, Brad.
Of course.
I was
Georgia.
I was all over, and they kept pushing me away because I was a troubled inmate. You know, I was fighting the system. I got my degree. I got my law. And once I learned that my fists didn't work, and my brain worked, and writing and law, and I got my law degree and everything else in prison, it was a whole different animal. I learned the BP system, and then I learned that system, and I learned every system in the world to the degree that I learned it. But what they do is they use that terminology. I don't know if they need a separate governing body on where they put people.
I think they need a separate governing body to oversee them. So if it's whether or not where they put them, whether it's not their administrative hearings, whether or not it's their inspections, they need a third party, a body that is not associated with the prisons and whatsoever, that's totally separate, that doesn't have anything, and doesn't owe anybody, doesn't kowtow to anybody. And that's what needs to happen. I mean, ultimately, that's what needs to happen.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say, we have that. It's the Inspector General.
It's
and I know, because I went this route. And that's all bullshit, because they never get to the Inspector. What gets to the Inspector General is what the BOP wants after they do their investigation.
Correct.
Which is bullshit. Like, we know every police agency says, oh, we'll do our own investigation. Let me shoot you and then investigate me.
But that's,
what the fuck is that?
But that's what happens all the time. And the ironic thing is that you could have 3 prisoners saying, and we did in Kodak's case, saying that he was on his knees, that he was soaking wet, he was in a paper underwear, that his hands were handcuffed behind his back. You can have everybody under the sun testify on his behalf. If one guard says, well, that's not what happened, then they say, well, the prisoners have something to gain, the guard doesn't have anything to gain.
And they don't do an investigation. When you told me, I remember when this all came out with what they did to him and they 4-pointed him, and I, as a man who was and I knew exactly that was true.
Yeah.
Every word, because you couldn't make it up. You wouldn't have to know it.
Right.
Unless you did it.
Yeah.
And I know, because it happened to me. And I'm saying, this is dead right. And why are they doing this to a kid? Because he is stubborn. And I was too. And I love that about him. But that's what's going to make Kodak a big success. I mean, forget his success in music. I'm talking about his success as a person.
Yeah.
He's going to grow up. He's going to, hopefully, it doesn't damage him. And there is a worry, and that's why we're doing this. Where do you think, what's your next step, and where do you think we should go with Kodak?
So we have the commutation that's pending.
When is that pending?
It's pending now. It's been pending for the past couple months.
When do you expect the decision?
Either this week or next week. It's got to be before the president leaves office. The president's leaving office on the 20th, so it has to be before the 20th. We've had hashtag FREEKODAK. Everybody's been tweeting towards at POTUS. POTUS at POTUS, and they're saying free Kodak, 46 months is too much for a paperwork offense. Everybody under the sun is tweeting to him. We've had a lot of support, and then, like I said, all these big black organizations that have been calling us. A lot of black leaders have been calling us, saying like this just doesn't make sense.
But this is that I'm calling for, and I'm not a black guy. But because it's right is right.
Right is right.
And that, I mean, I agree, and they should have the black organization, but they also should have other people.
They do. They do. We have support really across the board for this.
Said Logan Paul.
Yeah, Jake Paul, Little Pump. So like all the people in the music industry are behind him. I think just the regular average Joe is behind him because no one can figure out it's 46 months for a paperwork offense. It just doesn't sound right? And it's not. It really is excessive. And that's if he was serving it in a low, right? He's serving it in a maximum. You have guys like Michael Cohen who was used to work for the Trump organization.
No relation.
Turned on the president, gets out before his 50% is done, and gets to have house arrest because for reasons unbeknownst to me, he has no pre-existing conditions or anything like that. He gets house arrest. He violates his house arrest. They let him back out. It's unbelievable. The system is really very one-sided. I don't think that, in my opinion, that anything that happened to Kodak was really a fair determination of A, the facts, and B, where he should be placed and what he needs to go forward. So,
the cases I've seen I've seen cases get overextended, too much time. I've seen them piss off a federal judge, and you know what happens then. Their law. Obviously, it might get overturned, but by that time, it takes 3 years. I know a kid who cursed out a federal judge who was going to get 18 months. The judge gave him 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, it was overturned, but it took 3 years to be overturned. So I always say, you want to curse somebody out? Curse the cop out. Curse the cop. Don't fuck with a federal judge.
I'll tell you, not to get off a Kodak's subject, but I had a case in Orlando, credit card fraud, right? They charged it under the credit card fraud where it's not a 2-year min-man, because there is another one that's a 2-year min-man. He was scoring 6 months prison, 0 to 6 months. I talked to the prosecutor before I got there, and the prosecutor's like, I'm going to go along with probation. It wasn't really that big of a deal, blah, blah, blah. I show up in Orlando. It's an older judge, And I start to argue, and all of a sudden I see it turn south. He says that credit card fraud's the worst. He seemed to be a victim of credit card fraud. He's like, it's the worst crime that you can possibly commit. It's so horrible. And then the prosecutor, who's not my prosecutor, he was out for the day, sends in some other guy and he says, you know what, Judge, our hands are tied though. I said, his hands aren't tied. He offered probation. I don't understand what he's saying. His hands are tied. And the judge says, you know what, it's a horrible crime. And I said, listen, so give him the 6 months. I was going to ask for probation, but if you think it's so horrible, give him the top of the guidelines is 6 months, and we'll call it a day. No, I'm giving him 24. Gives him 24. This is a kid that thought, okay, I'm going to be in and out. Gives him 24 months. I appeal. I win the appeal from the 11th Circuit, but they, deny getting the judge off the case for the resentence, so we're going back in front of the judge. And B, they don't address whether or not the 24 months is too high. They just say he did it wrong. He didn't sentence him correctly. Now we go back in front of him, right? Now he knows everything that he did wrong. He corrects himself everywhere. Of course, now I'm indignant because at that point I know he's going to give him, we've already been in for 18. Kid's getting out in 2 months. So he's already been in for 18 months by the time the appeal comes through. So he's only got 2 months to go. So now I'm just indignant because he's not giving him more than 24 months. So I go on, my speech, which, I like to do, about how unfair this is. It's ridiculous. The kid should have never gotten it and blah, blah, blah. And the judge says, okay, you done? Yeah, 24 months. So now, and the kid gets out 2 months later.
I'm telling you, I know federal judges. I've been around them. I deal in the court. They're God. Don't ever fuck with a federal judge. I tell people, I don't give a shit who you are, what you did in life. Don't fuck with a federal judge.
It's true.
I watched a federal judge tell a state judge, no matter what you do to him, I can get him out. What I do to you, nobody can get you out. To another fucking judge, a state judge.
Yeah.
Federal judges are fucking good. You know that.
So, and listen, I've been in front of federal judges across the country, right? There's some federal judges that are like unbelievably great. Great.
100%.
Fair, smart, well-tempered, just great federal judges. And then there's some that aren't so great. I'll be honest with you. In Kodak's case, his judge, he treated us with respect. I think that in his mind, he was giving a fair sentence because Kodak was scoring 56 and he was giving us a break to give him, 46. I just think if we all took a step back from the case and really looked at the crime itself and not really looked at just the guidelines, which are suggestions, right? They say
ever since the case,
right? Booker
case. So, I won a case on that.
So they say
it's a Washington case,
right? So they say it is a suggestion, but it really isn't. Most judges stick pretty well by the guidelines. But if we all took a step back for a minute and said, man, this kid is 21 years old, and I think if the judge knew he was going to be going to a maximum security prison, I think that would have made a difference because I think he's a fair guy. I honestly do think he's a fair guy, and I think if he knew that he was going to a maximum security prison, that B, he wouldn't get RDAP or any of the programs he was sentencing him to, because I think in his mind, the 46 months really after 85% and
18 months.
Correct. After you do your 85%,
get a year, halfway house, you can do a lot of things.
So all of a sudden you're out in 17 or 18 months. In his mind, I think that's what he believed, when in reality now he's serving 46 months.
What worries me in the cases like this, and I've seen them because a kid happened when I was there, they get a short sentence, but they go to a maximum security and they get killed.
Correct.
And that really is sad.
Or they do something bad in the
because they have to survive. A guy tries to rape him, he stabs him, or whatever happens. Because it's a different environment. And he does not belong there. And now you ruin a life over something that was all bullshit. So let's get to the end. What can we do?
So what I would suggest is everyone get aboard the hashtag FREEKODAK. Tweet to @POTUS, POTUS. Tell them that 46 months is too much for a paperwork offense. And let's hope this commutation comes through. I'm hopeful that it will. There's several that are pending before the president that he's under consideration. The press has said he's on a list for a commutation, so that's good. But being on a list and getting it done are two different things. And I think if the president and I think the legal department of the White House look at this case in itself, in a nutshell, 46 months for a paperwork offense is crazy.
And the president has been good on about that.
He
I
has
remember
been.
he left the lady that got out and all that kind of stuff. Who was a drug case, was a stupid drug case,
Yes,
and she had 20 years.
Correct. He's been Alice Johnson.
Alice Johnson.
He's been very fair with his commutations up to this point. I'm hoping that continues, and like I said, hopefully it will come through.
If nothing happens, what is Kodak's release date?
So his release date now is 2022, like the actual release date from the prison. Obviously, you know that changes if he gets into a medium and he can do programs,
or he could lose good time,
or he could lose.
There's really not much. You get 85%.
Correct.
But still, that's 28 days. That's, I think, 28 days a year.
Correct.
I think it was. And I remember, man, I'd get in a fight. Oh, there's another fucking 28 days. There's another fucking. It adds up.
It adds up.
It adds up.
It adds up. So that's that, and then also he's eligible for a halfway house. Probably this summer he'll be eligible for a halfway house
because they did extend it to a year. You know, it used to be only 6 months.
Correct. Now it's 12.
Yeah.
So he should be eligible for a halfway house this summer. But I'm hoping it doesn't get to that point, and I'm hoping the president realizes that, you know, like I said, 46 months.
We're looking for a commutation.
Correct.
And let's talk right to Kodak, and I'll talk to him. You know, I hope you make it, young man, and we're going to try to help you in any way we can. Brad, I know your lawyer has been on this with me and everybody else, which you got to give him a lot of credit because he's not giving up. He calls your son. I believe that. I really do. And as for all his fans, I want you to make sure you go to, there'll be links in this video right here down below where you can go, where you can tweet, where you can email. You can even put Brad's information in our contact, and I'm sure he'll answer you, or somebody will answer in your office to help direct you in the right way to try to help him. What would you like to say at the end?
I always talk to Kodak. I talk to Kodak every week. He knows that he's a great kid. I know that he's going to do great things. I'm hoping
the audience, our audience, accept the help. Push as much as we can.
Yeah, we got to push as much as we can. That's the only thing that you can do in these situations is shed some light on it. Push as hard as you can. Push as much as you can. Tweet as much as you can. Text as much as you can. You know, I always call on people. You know, attorneys on themselves, they can do a lot of work, right? But like to really do a case and really to make a difference, you need like an army behind you. You need an army behind you with a voice. And that really takes it to another level. And I've always found in the most successful cases that I've had, people understood the plight of the defendant. They understood what was going on. They understood what happened. They understood how these things fell into place. And it was beneficial. And I'm hoping that that'll be the case here.
I got to agree. You know, Brad, I've seen him. He's passionate about his clients and what he believes in. And it is criminal justice reform and stuff like that. He's not just doing it. He's doing it for all the right reasons. All right, Brad, I want to thank you guys.
Thanks, Larry.
Have a great show. People, please check out the links below. Make sure you check all our stuff out. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And keep it going. Go to Discord. We're going to push something on Discord with this as well, with my crew. All right, everybody, have a great day. Stay safe. Don't go to jail yourself. Take care.